Hi, welcome back to AWS on 2020. My name is I'm a software advocate at AWS, and today I have the privilege to be joined by the excellent John Jackson, and we're going to talk about Amazon managed workflows for Apache Airflow. John, would you mind just introducing yourself to our viewers?
Yeah, so thank you for that introduction. I'm John Jackson. I'm the product manager for the newly released Amazon Managed Workflows for Apache Airflow that we just became generally available on November 24th.
Cool. Thanks, John. We're also live on Twitch if you're watching this inside the reInvent portal, and we're also live on Twitch. So if you have any questions for John as we're live, please pop them in the channel, and I'll monitor that and feed them up to John as we go through the show. So let's kick off. So the first thing we want to do is really level set what is a data workflow. So John, when you talk about data workflows and pipelines, what are they, and what is the underlying problem that you're trying to solve?
So the general problem we're trying to solve here is just the general transfer of data from one place to the next. So typically the place that's generating the data is not the same place that you need to use the data, right? So a really obvious example would be pulling from an API and storing in, say, an S3 bucket, right? That's just a very simple, I'm taking it from A and I'm taking it somewhere else I can use it in B. So these can get quite complicated over time. So as you start to draw from more sources and want to do more middle processing and you're trying to get different places, that becomes pretty complicated, especially when you start dealing with having to deal with failures, and sometimes things are connecting and sometimes they're not. And so having a system in place to be able to not just describe the workflow, but handle all of the various states that it's in is super important.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. A very important thing in when you're building out your data picture and data platform. So what about Airflow? How does it fit into this picture?
Well, Airflow has emerged as this fantastic tool to be able to describe these sort of workflows. It has hundreds of different operators and sensors that can integrate to a bunch of off-the-shelf systems, including 16 different AWS services, but also anything else you can imagine. The whole thing is written in Python, so it's very easy not just to describe your workflows, but also integrate to other systems, could be on-premise or in other remote systems. And it's become a really strong service to be our piece of software to be able to do this with. And what's also been driving it really well is the open source community that's behind Airflow supports it so well that there's new features and new functionality and a lot of support and community engagement that ensures that the software keeps growing and getting better.
Cool, awesome. And so obviously there'll be customers out there who already have Airflow running on AWS. So what's the motivation behind producing it as a managed service? What are the benefits?
Well, as great as Airflow is, there are a few challenges with getting it running. It's first of all, it's a wonderfully flexible piece of software, but with that flexibility means there's sometimes challenges in knowing the right way to set things up. There's sometimes the ability to easily create an environment, manage it, ensure its health, deciding how to integrate things like authentication into it, and just being able to quickly scale and provision these things to meet the growing needs of teams. One thing we found is that, all these data pipelines that are being developed are constantly getting more complicated. More teams are adopting it within different organizations, and being able to standardize on a tool that can grow with your organization is super important. And Airflow provides that. We are just making it a lot easier to do that sort of growth.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, we want to get into this really cool demo that you're going to do live, everybody. So for everybody watching, John is going to do a live demo, and it's a very cool demo. So we're going to show Airflow, Amazon Managed Workflows for Apache Airflow in action. So I think we'll just cut to your screen, John, and let's just take the viewers through the Managed Airflow experience.
Certainly. And by the way, if you're at home, you can play along. This is all live. Exactly what you're seeing here is exactly what you can do on AWS today. So this is just our product landing page for this. I'm going to go ahead and click on the big red Get Started button. And it's going to take me to my list of existing environments that I already have running. So each of these lines represents an entire Airflow cluster. This is all the elements that go into making Airflow, including the backend database and all the containers that allow it to run. So I'll get to these in a second. What I'll do first, though, is let's just go ahead and quickly create a new environment to just show how straightforward that is. So the first thing we need to do is probably give it a name. So I'll just call it What's Next. I'll throw a demo in there. So we're currently released with 1.10.12 of Airflow. We'll be supporting new versions. There's releases happening regularly, and we'll make those available as well. These workflows are in Airflow are called DAGs, descripted acyclic or directed acyclic graphs. And what this is a special type of workflow that basically it can't loop, and it requires certain steps to conclude before the next step happens. And these are just described as Python files, so we need somewhere for those to live. Now, what I could do is just go and pick one of the S3 buckets I already have, but we're going to go ahead and create a new one just to show what it is. So let's go ahead and create a brand new bucket for this. I'm going to call it What's Next bucket, demo, something like that. And the only really requirements around this bucket is it has to block public access because we don't want people writing workflows that affect your systems. And it does require versioning. The reason for that is if there's a failure in certain systems like plugins or requirements, we want to be able to roll back. Other than that, that's all there is to it. And then while we're here, I'll go ahead and we need, inside this bucket, we need a folder for those DAGs, those workflows to live. So I'll go ahead and create a folder. I can call it whatever I want. I'm going to be super creative and just call it DAGs, but you can call it whatever you'd like. So now I'm going to go back to the tab with our manage workflows, and I'm going to go ahead and select that bucket we just created. So here's our What's Next bucket, and we'll go ahead and pick the DAGs folder. Now, I won't get into it here, but we do support plugins, which is that extensibility that Airflow provides. And we also allow you to define additional Python libraries that you might need via a requirements.txt file that will pip3 install when we build the containers on your behalf. Now, in order to enable us to be able to access elements that you might have on premise or somewhere else in your VPC, we run both the Airflow workers that actually do the work and the scheduler that schedules those workers inside your VPC. Now, we actually do provide a quick link to create the right type of VPC, because the subnets do have to have internet access. They have to be private so that we can scale out for you. But we also need to have internet access so they can build your containers from the Amazon machine images. Now, the web server that Airflow uses for its user interface, we can either expose via a virtual VPC endpoint, which basically means then you could connect to it via Linux Bastion or wire it up to your existing NAT gateway. Or as part of the service, we also provide an application load balancer. It makes it super easy. Just provide your users a URL. Either way you do this, all your authentication and authorization for your users, for those Airflow users, is all done through IAM, just like anything else you would do in the AWS console. We then let you pick a size. Airflow, at least Airflow 1.x, has a single scheduler. And so that really defines how many workflows can be loaded and processed. But as far as execution, we can then provide scaling for your workers. So as a given worker becomes overburdened, we add additional workers. And when there's no more tasks queued or running, we'll just dispose of those extra workers for you. We have built-in integration to CloudWatch. So all of that is set up so you can monitor many different environments at once very easily. And then the last item that's going to be important later on in the demo is that these workers assume an execution role, just like if you were wanting to give an EC2 instance access to an S3 bucket. And what this allows me to do is make it very easy to provide the access to other AWS elements, and we'll see that in a second. So really, that's all there is to actually creating an Airflow environment. We'll go ahead and as this is sort of creating, what it's going to do is it's actually going to build all the elements that ordinarily would go through that would be a manual process in creating Airflow, like the metadatabase and things like that. But so that we don't have to wait, it does take a little bit of time. You can see it takes about 20 to 30 minutes to put all the pieces together. So rather than having you folks wait around for that, I'll go ahead and grab one that I already created. And this is just an empty environment I created so that doesn't have anything currently enabled in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and switch over, and we're going to go ahead and build an actual DAG, one of these workflows that describes what it's going to do here. So let me go ahead and pull up our, let's see, the correct folder. There we go. So I'm just going to pull up Visual Studio Code here, if we can share that on the screen. So it's just a blank Python file. And we're going to be able to do everything that we need for Airflow right from this Python file. So to save everyone from my typing, I'm just going to copy and paste things as I go rather than actually typing it out. And you can watch me put typos in and then back up, and then you don't want to see that. So every Airflow DAG, you're going to have to actually import into Python the DAG. This is a DAG is just that directed acyclic graph. It's the actual workflow involved. We then need to add in, well, what do we want to connect to? What kind of operators and sensors do we want to use? So in this case, I'm going to do this demo all with EMR. So I'm going to go and pull in the operator that actually creates a cluster or a job flow. I'll pull in another operator that adds steps to that. And then there's a last one that is the sensor that monitors what's going on. I'm going to grab a few other Python utilities. This is just Python. So if you want to write any Python that you want in here, you can do pretty much whatever you'd like. And then one other nice thing I'd like to do is use, each of your DAGs has to have a unique identifier. So what I find is easy is just use the actual name of the Python file. You don't have to, but this way you don't end up accidentally using the same name twice, which can cause some frustration, like where'd my DAG go? We do need some default arguments that we're going to pass into this DAG, really just who's the owner, that sort of thing that goes in it. And then after that, we can just start building our actual workflow. So we're going to use, again, for anyone who knows Python, it's just straight up, we're going to create one of these DAG objects. And then the first thing within that object is we're going to go through and we need to create an EMR job flow. And so we're just going to call that job flow operator. We're going to use the connection ID, which is actually blank because we don't need it. And then we're going to provide, what does that job flow actually look like? And that description, we'll go ahead and pull into just a simple JSON file that describes that exact information. So I'll just go ahead and scroll up a bit here, and we'll add it in. I'll scroll up to show you what I did. So you can see here, we're going to give it a name. I'm super creative and called it my demo cluster. This is where we put in, do we want it to be spot instances, for example, or what size we need to run on this. But this is everything we need. And then, of course, the key value pairs and the job flow, exactly the same as running it on a command line or the API. So after we've gone ahead and created this job flow, this workflow, it's not actually doing anything yet. So we're going to add some steps to it, which I know you can do as part of that create job flow, but you may have more than one steps. You might be conditional. So I'm going to use that second import that we did, which is the add steps operator. So Airflow has this ability to use what are called XCOMs to pass data from one task to the next. So we're actually pulling the job flow ID, that cluster ID, over from that first step into this step. So we know exactly which job flow we're going to add these steps to. And then now we need to, just like with the job flow, we need to provide some description. So I'm not going to be terribly creative on this either. It seems to be a bit of a theme. I'm going to go through and use the built-in calculate pi Spark job because it's easy and it's there. But of course, whatever your Spark steps are would work exactly the same thing. Now, the way these operators work in Airflow is they return immediately. These are completely asynchronous. So if we want to actually wait until this job is done before we do the next step, we're going to have to put in another Airflow type, which is called of unit, which is called a sensor. So I'm going to grab the step sensor here. And again, we're using that past information from the previous step. So I'm getting the job flow ID from the first step. I'm getting the step ID from the second step. And all this is going to do is just keep sitting there and waiting until something exciting happens, and then it's going to pass it along. So now we need to tell Airflow, well, how do these things relate to each other? Well, in this case, it's pretty simple. I'm going to take the first thing we created, the creator, and use two of these greater than signs. I'm going to say, add it to here, another couple of these, and we'll go in and put this sensor. And that's it. That's our job flow. So I don't have anything else I have to do on this. This is an entire workflow. I don't have to go to EMR to actually set up any of this. I can do it all from a single Python file. The only thing I need to do is actually get it up to our cluster. So what I've done is I've already connected to I'm just using the command line interface. You can use the Visual Studio plugins and all that sort of stuff for this as well. But I'm just going to go ahead and pass that right up to my S3 bucket. And now we're done over here, assuming I didn't screw anything up, which is always a possibility, but hopefully is not the case. And so let me go ahead and switch back again. And I'm going to switch back to my my Firefox screen so we can see what's exactly going on here. And let's go pick that. That's the right one. And if we hit refresh, actually, before we even hit refresh, there's one other thing I have to do. I haven't given this environment the ability to actually create this EMR cluster yet. So I do need to go over and tell this environment that it can actually go and do what it needs to do. So I'm going to go through and actually I can do it right from, in fact, make it a little simpler. I'll show you actually right from how we do it from the environment. So let me pull up the environment itself. And at the bottom, I can actually go right to that execution rule that is that this is the thing that these workers assume when they're running. And I want it, you can see it just has a built-in policy, which basically just says I can access my DAGs and some stuff like that. So let's go ahead and tell this thing that it's able now to go ahead and do some awesome, cool things on EMR, like calculating pi. So Elastic MapReduce, full access. And I'm just going to, obviously, you would probably, on a production environment, you would make it a lot more reduced than that, but that's the full thing we need. If I now go back to Airflow, I'll hit the refresh button here. We should hopefully see our DAG. I'll go ahead and enable it. And at this point, this should actually start kicking off automatically. And you can see, even while I was waiting, we've already started. So the job flow is already created. If I hit refresh, add steps has already been done. I'm gonna hit refresh again. And now that watch step, remember, this is the one that's just gonna wait until the job flow is done, which of course on EMR is gonna take a little bit of time. I'm not even sure how many digits of pi it calculates, but assume probably a fair number. I can go ahead and click on each one of these tasks and see what it did. So if I scroll down, I can see at the bottom here, it created this job flow ID. If I go back to if I look at the add steps, it shows me that it added a step to that job flow. And now that last item is just simply looking at, and this will just sit here until these steps are done, which takes a few minutes. Now, I don't even have to monitor this from Airflow if I don't want to. I can actually go through and go right to CloudWatch and see this exact same information. So as you saw when we created the environment, all these logs get pushed to CloudWatch automatically. So I can go through to my log groups here, and we can actually see here's that demo 2 tasks. And not surprisingly, that exact same information is still available here. So that's the whirlwind tour. It's pretty much all I have to share at this point, but that's the whirlwind tour of actually creating an Airflow environment on Amazon MWAA and connecting it up to EMR.
Awesome demo, John, and it all worked seamlessly. It was fantastic. The demo gods were very kind to us there. I think when I when I first saw this demo, I was just blown away. The fact that we could create a DAG without any interaction with EMR whatsoever. We could spin up EMR, make it do some work for us, and get a result back into Airflow. And we were completely abstracted away from EMR, which was really, really cool and a really cool demo. So thanks for showing everybody that. Cool, we're back. The follow-up questions and questions I have around Airflow and managed Airflow is probably the questions that I usually get asked by developers out in the field. And the first one is CloudFormation support.
Yes, we absolutely have CloudFormation support. It's already there. We're behind on our documentation, which I have to apologize for. As you'd understand, there's a lot of stuff going on with reInvent, but that will be available within the next week or so.
Awesome. And the second one is always, so Apache Airflow is obviously an open source product, like you said before. So how are we engaging with that community?
Well, I have to say the Apache Airflow community has been fantastic. So as soon as we were publicly announced, we reached out, we introduced ourselves and said we want to. How can we help? And the Airflow community has been fantastic. So we're looking to contribute in any way we can. We want to help not just make it better for how it works on AWS, but make it work better for everybody who uses Airflow. We have whether they're using our managed service or not, and we are 100% committed to being just offering the open source software, working directly with the open source community, making Airflow better for absolutely everybody, regardless of where you run it.
Great, great, fantastic. So these next set of questions I actually got from the community itself. So we have a number of heroes, data heroes that I asked if they had any questions for you around managed Airflow. And so the next ones are from them. So the first one is, how soon after Airflow 2 is released will we see it supported by MWAA?
Well, as soon as we can. So, understandably, the Airflow community is super excited about Airflow 2.0. It's got a ton of improvements, not the least of which is high availability schedulers. But there's just a ton of performance improvements, and there's a lot going on there that's fantastic. And so we're absolutely committed to releasing as soon as we can. Of course, it is a very new, it's almost a complete rewrite. Everything's been refactored and everything. So it's going to take a little bit of time for us to work it into our system. One thing we will be releasing sooner rather than later is the either 1.10.13 or 1.10.14, which was just, the latter was just announced. There's like a bridge release that makes it so you can basically write DAGs in the way that they will work in Airflow 2.0, but they're actually still running on a 1.10 platform. And so that'll also be a big help. So between those two efforts, we should be able to provide anyone who wants to run this, give them a nice smooth path to get from where we are with 1.10 to where we'll be with 2.0.
Awesome, and that's also fantastic. Migration paths are very important. So the next question I've got for you, John, is it possible or any best practices related to scheduling the uptime of the environment instance to reduce cost?
It's a great question. So, one of the tricks with Airflow is it's scheduler based, and obviously a scheduler doesn't do much unless it's actually running. So at the moment, really, we look at having it as at least your production environments are probably running all the time. Your dev environments, leveraging things like CloudFormation or the SDK or APIs, you can create those and tear those down. All the Airflow configuration information, all the DAGs live on S3, all the configurations and IAM and authorization is all done, can be done through CloudFormation. So you can automate the creation process for these sort of ad hoc systems as much as you want. You could get super creative with things you're doing. Like you could actually leverage the fact that, for example, we're exposing the Airflow's command line interface via our API. So you could actually create a thing where it builds a system, it runs a bunch of DAGs based upon the Airflow CLI, and then tears it back down again if you really wanted to. But in general, what we think most customers will do and how they use Airflow today is really leveraging their production Airflow to be running all the time, and really Airflow doing the small thing that triggers the big thing, right? Just like we did with EMR, right? The actual Airflow worker was done in a flash. EMR is busy. I don't know how many digits down pi it is right now. It's still trucking along. But Airflow is a quite small thing that can trigger that big thing. And that works really well for production. We're looking at ways to provide better optimizations of that as we go forward. And that's all absolutely on our roadmap.
Awesome. Great. So what I'm hearing is there are options to reduce that cost. Awesome. So the next question is all around the future. I know it's a new service, but customers are always asking about what's next, and what do you think is missing that you can offer customers in the future? And a really follow-up question to that is, what design decisions did you have to make in getting this service out?
It's a great question. So, ordinarily when you're releasing a new service, and especially a managed service, you have to come up with a good balance between flexibility and simplicity, right? So one of the key things we were trying to solve with managed Airflow is really the idea that it's easy to get started, it's easy to keep it up and running, it's easy to it handles the scaling and the provisioning and things like that for you. But of course, there's a lot of customers. Airflow has been around since I think 2017 or so, actually earlier than that. And there's a lot of customers that want a greater level of customization. We absolutely want to support that as well. So we're looking at a lot of different ways that we can give customers more ability to get under the hood if they wish of this environment of this system and providing more of those additional hooks. So that's a big part of it. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the second part of your question, which is, well, what were the decisions you had to make one way or the other? And we did really have to decide, well, how can we make this easy for most customers while still giving some flexibility for the rest? And we've done our best to try and make that as flexible as we can, and we're absolutely want to listen to our customers and say, well, what can we do better? How can we make this fit your desire, and how do you want to better use Airflow, and how can we make that a reality?
Mm-hmm. Great. And then the final question, John, is obviously you have had lots of interactions with customers already, and Airflow itself is it's a very flexible platform, and can be used for a lot of use cases. So what sort of use cases have you come across already for the service?
Yeah, so a lot of the use cases, I mean, 98% or so of Airflow usage is around ETL. And so some fantastic use cases, especially leveraging, data lakes, things like Redshift, Snowflake, and be able to access and facilitate that movement of data back and forth. Also spent some time talking with some of the autonomous vehicle folks from a few different locations. And that whole data pipeline is fascinating. The idea of the vehicles, how do you manage this massive amount of data that these vehicles process and accumulate over the course of the day, that has to not only be then processed to be able to do all the machine learning and aggregation, things like that, but then you've also got to facilitate the actual learning models, and how does that get back into the vehicle and learn again? And that's a super interesting use case that I think that whole machine learning use case is going to become bigger and bigger over time.
Awesome. Yeah, some fascinating stuff going on. So, John, I think we're just running out of time. Thanks for taking the time out to run through. Well, I thought personally was a very fascinating, interesting demo on the Airflow server. So, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. It was great to be able to share this service, and I hope everyone gets a chance to try it out and give us some feedback on how it worked.
Awesome. Well, thanks, John. So that's it from this episode of AWS What's Next. Stay tuned for whatever is coming up next. I haven't looked at the schedule. Sorry.